The first thing I heard was my daughter screaming my name. Not calling for her husband, not calling for a nurse. She screamed for me. I was standing in this hospital hallway when it happened, a thin beige corridor that smelled like disinfectant and burned coffee. The kind of place where time stretches and collapses at the same time. I had arrived 5 minutes earlier, still arguing with the parking machine, still annoyed that my phone battery was at 10%. Then the scream cut through the wall. Mom. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was hoarse, torn, like her throat had already given up. That was the moment I understood something terrible had already happened, long before anyone bothered to tell me. I pushed through the double doors before the nurse finished saying my name. My shoes squeaked against the floor. I remember that sound clearly because everything else blurred. My daughter lay in this hospital bed with tubes running out of her arms like fragile roots. One eye was swollen shut. The other stared straight at the ceiling, unfocused. Her lip was split. Purple fingerprints bloomed on her neck, unmistakable, cruelly precise. I had raised her alone after her father died. I knew every inch of that face. I knew what she looked like when she laughed, when she lied, when she tried to be brave. This was not an accident. A nurse tried to stop me, ask me to wait, ask me to calm down. I ignored her. I grabbed my daughter's hand. It was cold. Too cold. What happened? I said. She swallowed, winced. Tears slipped sideways into her hair. He said I made him do it. That sentence landed inside my chest like broken glass. He said I made him do it. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. Her husband's name burned in my mouth like poison, but I didn't say it yet. I forced my voice to stay even because mothers don't fall apart when their children are bleeding. Did he hit you before? I asked. She nodded once, tiny, ashamed. How long? Another pause, longer this time. Since Christmas. Christmas. We had all been together. Dinner at his parents' house. White tablecloth. Forced smiles. His hand tight on her waist whenever she spoke too much. I remembered thinking he looked proud, polished, successful. I remembered thinking I should be grateful she married so well. My stomach turned. A doctor stepped in. Middle-aged, tired eyes. He spoke gently the way people do when they think gentleness can soften truth. Concussion, cracked rib, internal bruising, observation overnight. I nodded as if he were discussing the weather. Then the door opened again, and there he was. Her husband stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, shoulders slouched in performance of concern. A faint scratch on his cheek. He looked inconvenienced more than worried. Oh, thank God, he said, voice thick with fake relief. I've been so scared. My daughter's hand tightened around mine. Her nails dug into my skin. I turned slowly. I had imagined this moment in nightmares before, the first face-to-face with the man who hurt my child. I had imagined screaming, slapping, lunging. Instead, something colder moved through me. You don't get to stand there, I said. He blinked, smiled slightly as if I were being unreasonable. This is my wife. She is my daughter, I said, and you don't get to stand there. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. The doctor cleared his throat. Her husband lowered his voice. Let's not make a scene. That was when I knew. He wasn't afraid. Not of me, not of the hospital, not of consequences. He leaned closer, close enough that only I could hear him. She slipped, he said softly. You know how emotional she gets. I looked at the scratch on his face, at the fingerprints on her neck, at the way my daughter stopped breathing when he leaned in. Something inside me settled into place. I smiled. Get out, I said. He scoffed, straightened. You don't get to tell me what to do. I raised my voice just enough. Get out, I repeated, or I tell the doctor exactly what those marks mean. The room froze. He hesitated, calculated, then smiled again, thinner this time. This isn't over, he said. I watched him leave. I didn't follow. Because that night, sitting beside my daughter's bed, listening to the steady beep of machines, keeping her body honest, I made a promise I did not speak out loud. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not rush. I would dismantle his life piece by piece, and he would never touch her again. The door closed behind him, and somewhere deep inside me, something old and dangerous woke up. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the plastic chair beside my daughter's bed and watched the rise and fall of her chest like it was the only thing tethering me to the world. Every beep of the monitor drilled into my skull. Every time she flinched in her sleep, my hands curled into fists I kept carefully folded in my lap. Anger is loud at first. It roars. It demands action. But the anger that settled over me by dawn was quieter, denser. It pressed down instead of exploding. That kind of anger plans. When the nurse changed shifts, I stepped into the hallway and called a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in over 10 years. Her name was Margaret. We had worked together once back when I was still on the board of a mid-sized manufacturing company before I retired early to help my daughter with her first baby. Margaret answered on the third ring. I need you, I said. She didn't ask why. I'll be there in an hour, she said. Hospital or coffee? Hospital. When Margaret arrived, she took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. She followed me into the small family room down the hall, a windowless space with a couch that smelled like old perfume and regret. I told her everything. Not in order, not neatly. Christmas dinner. The way he spoke over my daughter, the bruises hidden under long sleeves, the fingerprints, the lie about slipping. Margaret listened, took notes. Her jaw tightened with every sentence. This is criminal, she said finally. Yes, I said, but I don't want him arrested. She raised an eyebrow. I want him ruined. She studied me carefully, then nodded once. Tell me about him, she said. Everything. So I did. His job, senior manager at a private logistics company. Ambitious, well-liked, untouchable in his own mind. His parents' money. The house they lived in technically under his father's trust. The prenup my daughter had signed because she didn't want to look greedy. Margaret tapped her pen against the pad. He has leverage, she said. So we take it away. How? Slowly. Later that morning, a police officer came to take my daughter's statement. She was weak, fragile. But when he asked her what happened, she didn't look at me for permission. He hit me, she said. He has been hitting me. I squeezed her hand. Her husband was arrested that afternoon. I didn't go to the station. I stayed with my daughter, watched as something shifted in her eyes when she realized the world had not ended because she told the truth. That night, after she fell asleep, I went home to my empty house and opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Old files, old connections, old favors. I had not been a powerless woman in my life. I had simply chosen to be quiet. By the end of the week, his company knew. Not officially, not yet. But rumors move faster than truth. By Thanksgiving, his name would be poison at dinner tables that once welcomed him. And by Christmas, the man who once told my daughter she made him do it would finally understand what accountability felt like. He still thought this was a misunderstanding. That was his final mistake. The first hearing was scheduled for a gray Monday morning, the kind that makes everything feel smaller and meaner than it already is. I sat behind my daughter in the courtroom close enough that I could feel her shoulder tremble when his name was called. She wore a navy cardigan, buttoned all the way up, sleeves pulled down to hide the fading bruises. Her hair was neatly brushed like armor. She looked older than she should have. Tired in a way sleep does not fix. He walked in late. Of course he did. He wore a tailored gray suit, expensive shoes, confidence polished into every step. He didn't look at my daughter. He didn't look at me. He nodded at his lawyer like this was a quarterly meeting that had run long. That was when I saw it clearly. He still believed this was about inconvenience, not consequence. The prosecutor read the charges: domestic assault, repeated physical abuse. The words echoed flatly in the room stripped of blood and fear, but I watched his jaw tighten just slightly, not with guilt, with irritation. When my daughter took the stand, his lawyer tried to make her small, asked about her temper, her anxiety, her medication, asked why she waited so long to report, asked if she had been drinking that night. I felt my nails dig into my palms, but my daughter surprised me. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. I didn't report because I was scared, she said, and because he told me no one would believe me. She paused, looked directly at him for the first time. He said even my own mother would choose him over me. The courtroom went quiet. I leaned forward. His eyes flicked to mine just for a second. I didn't blink. After the hearing, he tried to approach her in the hallway. The bailiff stepped between them. That's my wife, he said sharply. No, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. That's my daughter. And you're done. He laughed under his breath. You think you've won something? I leaned closer. I think you've only seen the door close. You haven't noticed the walls moving yet. His smile faltered. That afternoon, Margaret called me. His company's board meeting is tomorrow, she said. Unofficial emergency session. I closed my eyes. Good, I said. By Wednesday, he was placed on administrative leave. By Friday, his photo disappeared from the company website. He came to my house that night. I knew it was him before I opened the door. Men like him knock with entitlement. What do you want? I asked. You're poisoning people against me, he said. His voice was tight now, controlled. This has gone far enough. I tilted my head. Far enough was when you put your hands around her throat. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. She wouldn't have survived without me, he said. You know that. She's weak. You always coddled her. That was when I knew there was no remorse hiding anywhere inside him. Get off my property, I said. This ends when I say it ends, he snapped. I smiled. No, I said. This ends when the truth finishes chewing you up. I closed the door in his face. Behind it, I stood perfectly still until my heart slowed. Then I picked up the phone and made the next call. He fought back harder than I expected. Not with fists this time, with money. Within days, his lawyer filed motions accusing my daughter of exaggeration, emotional instability, marital conflict. They requested access to her medical history, her therapy notes, her emails. He wanted to bury her in paper until she disappeared. Margaret anticipated it. "We counter," she said calmly, "and we go public where it hurts." She filed for divorce on my daughter's behalf. Contested, no settlement, full disclosure. The prenup became his shield until it wasn't. There was a clause, one he had forgotten, one his father's lawyers had insisted on years ago. Morality. Infidelity, abuse, criminal behavior voided the protections. He panicked. I could hear it in the voicemail he left me at 2 a.m. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "My parents will destroy you." I saved it. Then I sent it to Margaret. The next week, his parents called me. They invited me to their house, the big one, the one with the iron gates and the polished smiles. I went. His mother poured tea like we were discussing a fundraiser. "This is unfortunate," she said, "but families handle things privately." I met her gaze. "Your son beat my daughter." She flinched. His father cleared his throat. "We're willing to make this go away." "How?" I asked. "Money," he said. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You taught him well," I said, "but you taught him wrong." Their expressions hardened. "Careful," his mother said. "You could lose everything." I leaned forward. "I already lost the illusion that you raised a good man," I said. "You're the ones about to lose something real." By Christmas, the charges stuck. By New Year's, the divorce court stripped him of the house. And the final blow was still coming. Because the thing he never asked himself was why a woman who raised her daughter alone, who survived grief and silence, who learned how power really works, would ever stop at justice. I was just getting started. He did not come after me directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he went after the one thing he believed would break my daughter faster than bruises ever had. Her child. The first sign was a letter from his lawyer, delivered in a thick white envelope that landed on my kitchen table like a threat disguised as paperwork. Petition for temporary custody. Allegations of emotional instability. Claims that the hospital incident had traumatized the child due to my daughter's volatile behavior. I read it twice, slowly. Then I felt something inside me go completely still. My daughter was sitting across from me, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. When I looked up, she was already shaking her head. "He said he would take her," she whispered. "He said no judge would trust me." I stood up so abruptly the chair scraped across the floor. "No," I said. "He doesn't get to do that." But fear is clever. It doesn't listen to logic. It creeps in through memory. That night, my daughter woke up screaming. I heard it through the baby monitor she kept beside her bed, even though her child was asleep in the next room. She gasped for air like she was drowning. When I rushed in, she clutched my arm and sobbed. "He said I'm a bad mother," she kept saying. "What if they believe him?" I sat on the edge of her bed and held her the way I did when she was 5 and terrified of thunderstorms. "They will not," I said, "because we are not walking into this blind." The next morning, I met Margaret before sunrise. "He's escalating," she said after reading the filing. "That means he's scared." "Good," I replied. "Now tell me how to end this." She leaned back, studied me. "We stop playing defense," she said. "We expose a pattern." Over the next 2 weeks, we pulled every thread. Former co-workers who remembered his temper behind closed doors. An assistant who quietly admitted she had transferred departments to avoid being alone with him. A neighbor who had heard shouting through the walls long before the hospital night. And then there was the woman. Her name came up accidentally. A credit card charge, a hotel in another city, repeated visits, infidelity. When Margaret confirmed it, she didn't smile. "He thinks this is about power," she said, "but it's about credibility." We subpoenaed everything. Phone records, travel expenses, internal company emails. The custody hearing was scheduled for the second week of January. He walked in confident again, smiling at the judge, whispering to his lawyer. My daughter sat straighter than I had ever seen her. When his lawyer began painting her as unstable, Margaret didn't interrupt. She waited. Then she stood and dismantled him. She introduced evidence of his affairs, testimony from coworkers, audio recordings of his voicemail threats, photos of my daughter's injuries dated weeks apart. The judge listened, expression unreadable. When the decision came, it was swift. Temporary full custody to my daughter, supervised visitation only. He slammed his fist on the table. The bailiff stepped forward. I caught his eye as he was escorted out. For the first time I saw real fear. He blamed me. Of course he did. The messages started that night. Emails, texts from unknown numbers, accusations wrapped in desperation. "You ruined my life. This is your fault. She will crawl back when you're gone." I didn't reply. Silence unnerves men like him. But he wasn't finished. 2 days later, Margaret called me with a tone I didn't like. "He's filed a civil suit," she said, "against you." I closed my eyes. "Defamation," she continued. "Interference, emotional distress." I laughed once, short, sharp. "He's suing the wrong woman." "That's what worries me," she said. "He's desperate enough to burn everything." Including himself, I thought. The deposition was scheduled quickly. He wanted to intimidate me, put me on record, force me to back down. I showed up early, dressed carefully, neutral colors, calm posture. When I sat across from him, he smirked. "You look tired," he said softly. "This is what happens when you meddle." I met his gaze. "This is what happens when you hit women," I said. His lawyer objected. Margaret didn't flinch. During the deposition, he lied. About the affair, about the threats, about the night in the hospital. Margaret let him talk. Then she slid a folder across the table. Phone records, hotel receipts, emails sent from his work account. His face drained of color. "You perjured yourself," she said evenly. "Multiple times." He stammered, sweated, looked at his lawyer like a child. The civil suit collapsed within days. But the damage didn't stop there. Perjury has consequences. So does lying under oath when you're already under criminal investigation. The prosecutor reopened the case with new charges. By the end of January, he was no longer fighting for custody. He was fighting to stay out of prison. That night, my daughter sat beside me on the couch, her child asleep against her chest. "I didn't think I'd survive this," she said quietly. I kissed the top of her head. "You didn't," I said. "You transformed." Outside, snow fell softly, clean, quiet. But inside me, I knew the storm wasn't over yet. Because men like him don't accept defeat. They wait. And I was ready. He crossed the line on a Tuesday. Not in court, not through lawyers. He showed up at my daughter's workplace. She called me from the bathroom, whispering breath ragged. "He's here," she said. "He's telling my supervisor I'm unstable. He says I'm dangerous." I felt heat surge up my spine. "Stay where you are," I said. "Do not engage him." I drove there faster than I should have. Every red light felt like an insult. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I saw him through the glass doors, gesturing wildly, leaning too close to a young manager who looked trapped between politeness and fear. I walked in and said his name. He turned, smiled. That same old smile, the one that assumed control. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I work here," my daughter's manager said weakly. I ignored them both. "You are harassing a protected witness," I said, "on camera." His smile twitched. "I'm just concerned," he said loudly. "She's been acting erratic. I thought her employer should know." I stepped closer until he could smell my perfume. "You are done," I said. "Leave, now." He leaned in, whispered. "You think you won," he said, "but I know things about you." That was new. My pulse slowed. "What things?" I asked. He straightened, smoothed his jacket, addressed the room. "Ask her," he said, pointing at me, "why she left the board of that company so suddenly all those years ago." The manager's eyes flicked to me. I smiled. "Because my husband was dying," I said evenly, "and I chose my family." He laughed, too loud. Not the story I heard, he said. Security arrived then, asked him to leave. He resisted just long enough to be escorted out. But his words stayed. That night I made calls I hadn't wanted to make. Old colleagues, former executives, people who remembered the truth. By morning I understood his mistake. He had gone digging in my past without knowing which doors were safer left closed. Because yes, I had left that board abruptly. And yes, there had been an investigation into fraud. Not mine. His former company. The one that quietly settled years ago. The one he now worked for. The one that had promoted him. The next hearing wasn't about custody or assault. It was about money and lies. The call came from Margaret just after dawn. "You need to sit down," she said. "I am sitting," I replied. "Good," she said, "because his company's internal audit just became public." I closed my eyes. "What did they find?" "Accounting irregularities," she said, "expense manipulation, shell vendors, and a senior manager who signed off on all of it. His name." The timing was exquisite. He had tried to scare me by threatening my past. Instead, he handed me his future. The prosecutor added new charges. White collar, federal interest. His lawyer requested continuances, delays, anything to stop the bleed. But boards do not wait for court. They cut loose liabilities. By the end of that week, he was fired. Not placed on leave, terminated. No severance, no quiet exit. The story hit the local business pages, then the regional ones. Domestic abuse defendant, corporate fraud investigation, custody loss. His parents called again. This time there was no tea. "This has gone too far," his mother said. Her voice shook now. "He's sick. He needs help." "He needed help before he hurt my daughter," I replied. His father tried a different angle. "What will it take to end this?" he asked. "Name it." I thought of my daughter's bruises, her nightmares, the way she used to flinch at raised voices. "It ends," I said, when the court says it ends. They threatened me then, quietly, elegantly. I listened, took notes, recorded the call. That recording joined the others. At the next hearing, his lawyer looked exhausted, his suit wrinkled, his confidence gone. When the judge denied bail revision and cited pattern behavior, I watched his shoulders finally sag. Afterward, as he was led past me in cuffs, he stopped. "This isn't justice," he said hoarsely. "This is revenge." I met his eyes. "No," I said. "This is accountability. Revenge is what comes next." He didn't understand. He still thought this story ended with prison. He had no idea what waited outside those walls. Prison does not end a man like him. It clarifies him. While he waited for trial, sitting in a county facility that smelled of bleach and stale sweat, he began telling his story to anyone who would listen. In his version, he was the victim, betrayed by an ungrateful wife, targeted by a vindictive mother-in-law, destroyed by lies. Men like him need an audience the way lungs need air. And he found one. Her name surfaced in a way I did not expect. A social worker assigned to my daughter's custody case called Margaret with a careful tone. Too careful. "There's been a concern raised," she said, an anonymous statement. Anonymous rarely means unknown. The claim was simple and vicious, that I had manipulated my daughter into testifying, that I controlled her finances, that the household environment was coercive. Margaret and I exchanged a look across the table. "He's recruiting," she said. The hearing was set quickly. Emergency review, no warning. The courtroom was smaller this time, intimate, dangerous. The woman sat 3 rows back, late 40s, well-dressed, calm in the way people are when they believe they're righteous. I recognized her before Margaret whispered the name. The other woman, not the affair from hotel receipts. This one was different. She had been writing it to him in jail, offering support, advocating on his behalf, presenting herself as a concerned professional, a licensed therapist. The judge listened as she spoke about his remorse, his trauma, his potential for rehabilitation. She did not look at my daughter once. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. "I would like to submit evidence," I said. Margaret handed over a file. Letters, emails, recorded calls. Her tone changed when she read them. Not because of romance, because of strategy. They had discussed undermining my daughter's credibility, framing me as controlling, using professional language as a weapon. The judge's face hardened. The therapist was dismissed from the case on the spot. Later, her license would be reviewed. Outside the courtroom, my daughter broke down. "I thought it was over," she sobbed. "Why won't he stop?" I held her face in my hands. "Because this is the last place he feels powerful," I said, "and we are taking that too." That night, I sat alone and realized something chilling. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to be believed, and belief once shattered publicly does not come back. The trial began in early spring. By then, the story had hardened into fact. Domestic abuse, fraud, custody loss, professional misconduct by an ally. The courtroom was packed. I sat behind my daughter again, but this time she did not shake. She had changed. So had I. When he took the stand, he tried charm, then anger, then tears. He spoke of stress, of expectations, of feeling emasculated. The prosecutor let him talk, then asked one question. "Did you ever tell your wife she made you hurt her?" Silence. He glanced at his lawyer. Too late. "Yes," he said quietly. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. Guilty. On all counts. Sentencing was set for the following month. Outside reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. He was no longer invisible. He was an example. Weeks later, as we waited for sentencing, his parents requested one final meeting. I went alone. They looked older, smaller. "We lost him," his mother said, "but you don't have to keep punishing us." I folded my hands. "This was never about you," I said. "It was about stopping him." His father nodded slowly. "What happens now?" he asked. I stood. "Now," I said, "we live." When sentencing day arrived, my daughter spoke, not with rage, with clarity. "I want my child to grow up knowing this is not love," she said. He was sentenced to years that sounded short on paper and long in reality. As he was led away, he looked at me one last time. There was no hatred left, only emptiness. I felt no triumph, only relief, and the quiet beginning of something new. After sentencing, the noise faded faster than I expected. The reporters moved on, the court calendar filled with new names. His name became something people lowered their voices about, then stopped mentioning altogether. That is how real consequences work. Not with explosions, but with erasure. My daughter and her child moved into a small rental on the other side of town. Not the kind of place she once dreamed of, but safe, quiet, sunlight in the mornings, a park within walking distance. The first time I visited, she apologized for the clutter. "I'm still figuring out who I am without him," she said. I looked around at the toys scattered on the floor, the half-assembled bookshelf, the grocery list taped to the fridge. "This," I said, "is what rebuilding looks like." She smiled, a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. The aftermath came in waves. His parents sold the mansion. Quietly. Downsized. They stopped returning calls from people who used to beg for their invitations. The therapist lost her license 6 months later. The board cited ethical violations and exploitation of a vulnerable defendant. She wrote a letter of apology that never once mentioned my daughter's name. His former colleagues stopped defending him. Some reached out privately, confessing things they had ignored. Others stayed silent. Silence is its own confession. One afternoon, while sorting mail, I found a letter addressed to me in handwriting I recognized, from prison. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the table for hours, like a test I had already passed. When I finally read it, there were no apologies. Only explanations. How he had felt trapped. How everyone had betrayed him. How none of this would have happened if people had just listened. At the end, one line stood out. "You took everything from me." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the trash. "No," I thought. "You handed it over. That night, my daughter called me. I slept through the night," she said. "No nightmares." I closed my eyes. "Good," I said. That was when I knew the story was truly ending, not with punishment, but with peace. Time does not heal by itself. It waits for permission. A year later, my daughter hosted Thanksgiving dinner in her own place. Nothing fancy, a small table, a turkey slightly overcooked, laughter that came easily and stayed. Her child ran circles around the living room, fearless and loud. At one point, my daughter caught my eye across the table. "We survived," she said softly. I shook my head. "We rebuilt," I corrected. After dinner, when the house grew quiet, I sat alone and thought about the woman I had been at the beginning of all this. The one who believed staying calm meant staying powerless. The one who thought justice belonged to institutions instead of people willing to fight for it. I had learned something else. That revenge, when stripped of cruelty, is simply truth applied without mercy. That accountability feels brutal only to those who have never faced it. That protecting your child does not end when they grow up. It evolves. I do not regret a single step I took. I do not regret the doors I closed. If anything, I regret how long I waited to believe my instincts. If you are listening to this and wondering what you would do in my place, I hope you never have to find out. But if you do, I hope you remember this. You are not too old to fight. You are not too late to act. And you are never wrong for choosing your child over someone else's comfort. If this story moved you, helped you, or reminded you of your own strength, take a moment to let me know. Like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe so these stories reach the people who need them most. Because silence protects the wrong people. And stories like this are how we take that power back.